So hey, welcome everyone to this TechChill session. My name is Robin Wauters. I'm the founding editor of Tech.eu. Very delighted to be invited to moderate the following session. Very, very sad that we don't get to meet in person at TechChill. I would have loved to be there, but unfortunately that was not in the cards today. We're gonna have a panel on EdTech, education technology. I think the official title is something like paradigm shift in the EdTech space. Very lofty, but we'll see where we get at the end of this session. The stopwatch is on, the speakers are here. So we're gonna start like every other panel ever always starts, is with a quick round of introductions. We're gonna kick off, ladies first, of course. Elena, why don't you introduce yourself first?
Yeah, thank you for this introduction. My name is Elena, and I work as an investment manager at Jenavs Investments. We are located in Kiev. We have our colleagues working from some Baltic states like Estonia also, and we are very active in education tech field because we have invested in 15 companies within the last 2 years, and 7 or 8 of them are in education technology space. And also our ambition, our plan is to invest into every possible niche of education technology in CE region and Baltic countries, and also maybe look at Finnish startups, because I really like Finland, so it's something that is interesting to us too.
Right, so you want to invest in every niche of education. That sounds very ambitious, but very, very doable as well. You mentioned Finland, so that brings me to our next speaker, Vesa, all the way from near Turku, I think he said, but all the way from Finland. Who are you and what do you do?
Thanks, Robin. So yeah, Vesa Perala is my name, and I'm the founder and CEO of Planet, and also the co-founder of Graphogame. So 2 EdTech companies. We can, Elena, discuss both of them at any given point of time. So I've been in this EdTech industry for about 10 years, been an entrepreneur for 15, and as I'm a pretty old guy already, so I have also a 15-year corporate background, back in mid-90s or something. So happy to be here.
We're not using the word old, only experienced. That's
seasoned, exactly.
Seasoned, yeah, good. Ernests, you're up next. Go ahead.
Sure. Hi, good to be here. I'm Ernests. I'm a co-founder of an EdTech startup, Edurio. We're based between London and Riga. We were founded in 2014. We work in stakeholder feedback management, so parent, pupil, and staff feedback for schools and school groups. We work with about 1,500 schools in the UK and globally. Yeah, we'll be glad to participate and share some of those experiences.
Thank you, Ernest. Your sound is not top-notch, so if you can somehow fix the microphone, that would be amazing. Last but not least, we have Kai. Kai, welcome.
Thank you so much. So yeah, I'm firstly delighted to be here. My background, the kind of typical startup environment for 8 years, then a few years in management consulting, and then prior setting up Sparkmind, which is our EdTech focused VC fund. I was working for Sanoma Learning for 8 years, and for those of who don't know, Sanoma Learning is the biggest educational publisher in Europe, and arguably one of the biggest EdTech houses in Europe. Yeah, so shortly about our fund, Sparkmind, laser focused on EdTech. We've launched investments in 2020. So we are about year and a half in now, made 7 investments, and we look at education very broadly. So from early childhood education to K-12, to higher education, to professional development, corporate learning, lifelong learning, all of it. As long as there is, I would say, pedagogy in the center of the product or the service, we are interested. Geographically, we tend to focus on Europe. So that's where we are, and typical ticket size is from 500,000 to 3-4 million. So yeah, glad to be here.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for joining. Again, my name is Robin Wauters from Tech.eu. I'll be the moderator of the session, which is amazing. It's amazing for you, but also amazing for me because I don't know a lot about EdTech. So I'm here to learn as much as you are. Maybe let's kick off with Kai's already sort of started this, but let's come up with sort of a definition of what EdTech actually is, because it means different things to different people. That much I understood. So maybe Vesa, can you sort of give your take on what the definition of EdTech is?
Yeah, I think actually Kai mentioned the keyword, the magic word, pedagogy. I think actually the problem in EdTech has been too much focus on the tech part. And if you only focus on the tech part, you're actually deploying software. And we all know what happens to bad CRM projects. They cost a lot and nobody uses those. So to me, the EdTech or proper EdTech is definitely a fusion of online pedagogy and technology. Technology can be then a lot of different kind of things. It can be content format, it can be an application, it can be machine learning, whatever. But the pedagogy is the key thing here.
Not bad. Ernest, can you do better?
I would look even wider beyond online pedagogy. So I think technology can be extremely powerful in supporting physical pedagogy as well. So to me, EdTech would be the application of technology for the ambition of improving or radically changing education.
That's a great one. Does anyone want to build on those two definitions, or does that about cover it?
I think that I would like to add that for me, education technology is also about making education more accessible and more cheap for more people around the world. And as we see in the education technology field, it's becoming better. It's becoming better and easier for more and more kids and adults to learn something just sitting at home. And also, EdTech is sometimes also an innovation which is used in order to make the education process easier and more effective.
Yeah, I like what you said, Elena, because that means that EdTech is sort of goes beyond like the online language learning or tools that you can use in the classroom, but also sort of on the fringes of everything that makes everything related to education easier as a support mechanism. So I like that. Okay, I think we're roughly came to an agreement on what EdTech is. Now let's get to the.
I think actually could done maybe add one more thing actually, because I very much like what Elena said about the scalability, because that's the sort of real good indication of what EdTech can be doing when it's really applied. Because one of my favorite numbers is by UNESCO already back from 2016, saying that we're going to be missing 69 million teachers by 2030. And to get those new teachers, we should found 2 universities every single day. And I mean, everybody knows it's not going to happen. It hasn't happened. It won't happen. So the conventional means won't deliver. So what do we have left? Definitely the scalability brought by proper EdTech solutions.
Yeah. Okay, Ernest, you singled out physical. How do you pronounce it? Pedagogy. Anyway. Can you give some examples, because I don't know what that means?
No, I mean basically the old in-person education. So as opposed to something that is facilitated purely via technology. One thing that we see in the UK, for example, is that currently in the kind of COVID recovery stage, a lot of schools are returning to in-person teaching and learning. And what's really interesting is how do you learn from what's happened up to this point? So kind of when everybody was plunged into pure online delivery model, and how do you come out with a model that is even better than before, and even better than online only, and better than prior to online? So how can you combine the aspects of learning in person, learning in groups, physically together, with the massive leaps that technology can bring? And I remember a mentor of mine said a while ago when we started, he said, innovating in education is really easy because you don't actually have to innovate. You just need to do what every other industry was doing 10 years ago. And that's something that I think now for the first time we're kind of looking beyond that. We're not playing catch up, but we're actually pushing the limits of education, and that will influence online education and physical in-person education, and has massive potential to do so.
Great. The reason I was asking is because I thought you meant like tangible tools that you can use within education. So thanks for clarifying that. Kai, when you look at that from an investment perspective, you look at the EdTech space, do you subcategorize it into different pieces where you look at opportunities per subcategory, or is it just one big field and one big happy family that you want to get to know?
And we are pretty kind of mindful of segmentation because they all behave very differently. So if we look at early childhood education, for example, where if you would try to push a group of 5-year-olds for distance learning, I mean online learning, the attention span is quite different from what you would expect to see at the university level, right? So the kind of role of the teacher is quite different, and the process of learning might be quite different. So we do categorize, and we typically look at early childhood education as the first age group. Then we talk about K-12, so that's primary and secondary school. Then we go to higher education, then professional and corporate training and learning. And then I think we talk about lifelong learning as a kind of a general term to cover whether you want to learn how to play a guitar, improve your language skills, learn a new hobby, or basically anything like that.
Yeah, I had a subscription to masterclass.com. Shoot me now, because it was renewed automatically. So I'm glad I got a refund when I complained. I've never used it. I'm a big fan of lifelong learning. For some reason, that just didn't stick. Completely aside from the discussion, but it's something that I noticed. Does anyone have something to add to something that the other person was saying? Otherwise, I'll move to the next topic. Okay.
I think we can move to the next one.
Yeah, great. So I look at education from a very basic standpoint. I'm not an investor. I'm not an entrepreneur in this space. I look at myself. I'm 40 years old. If I look at my education, of course, technology didn't play a huge role. I have young kids. One of them is 10. The other one is 7. I look at what they're doing in school, and I don't see a lot of difference. I live in Belgium, so I don't know if it's different from other countries, but I generally don't think technology is already a big part of the teaching process. It became a big part last year, but very suddenly and very drastically when somehow these teachers need to shift to sort of online classes and making sure that they can follow up on the work. So they started using tools like Notion. All of a sudden it was necessary and doable. Why wasn't it before? Like why did we need a COVID pandemic to get to this point? I don't really understand that. So if anyone wants to grab that one.
May I take the first punch on this one?
Absolutely.
I think this will be a very good discussion. To be honest, I don't think there is, many things that are fully broken with the physical setup of how we teach kids. I think, and here I come back to the kind of segments. So where, if we think of, K-12 school, the purpose of it, it's not just for sitting in the classroom and kind of downloading new information to a child, but it's much more. So you learn social skills, you learn, how to play with your friends, and you can ask the teacher, and actually the physical kind of setup is also pretty useful for the parents, at least for my personal perspective. I think my days would be quite different if the boys, being 6 and 9, would not go to school. So I think the model as such is not broken. I think the role of the teacher has been changing and will be changing in the future, and they are transforming from being a kind of a delivery channel to more towards learn how to learn, more like a coach, so to say. And I think, that's it will evolve fairly, how would I say, it will find its natural speed. Right. And I mean, if you talk to a 7-year-old or a 8-year-old and think, ask them, how was it, doing distance learning? Not many actually, were very, very happy about it.
No, they're definitely not jumping up and down about it.
That's the point.
Yeah.
That's the kind of community around you, and you lose some of that going on.
Actually, And actually, I hear a lot of people say that's because of those social skills and friends are really, they still live in like a very small circle of people, right? So it's very important for them to interact with others. But then I find that that's true for any age. Like it doesn't really change when you're secondary education or higher. Still the element of physical, being surrounded with people and being able to interact with people physically, that changes a lot for me at least. Anyway, but that's sort of something that we might come back to later. But on a broader level, what I was talking about, does anyone have any comments on or thoughts on?
Definitely, I think it's. I mean, I have the 16 and 8-year-old sons, and the younger one had to always go remote schooling a year ago, which wasn't really remote; it was homeschooling, and that's basically what you hear. And I mean, we're mixing actually terms here quite a lot. I mean, the news is all about covering actually how the remote working, remote schooling doesn't work. And I mean, if you think about those examples, what we've been served as parents. So the discussion is about whether we should be using Teams or Google Meet for some sort of webinars. It's not about what we deliver and how we do the remote learning overall. So I think actually the biggest issue is that it's really poorly done on global level. It's basically copying classroom experience to digital channel, and there is no chance it's going to work. Yeah. And that's basically the online pedagogy we need to think about. How do we take this social interaction into account in digital environment? And it doesn't mean I fully agree with Kai. Of course, you need the physical social interaction as well. But when you do things remotely, you have to do it properly. And that's that's the issue. And I mean, we've been doing, well, Planet is about gathering learning analytics automatically from digital learning. We are coming up with case studies which can prove actually that the learning experiences and the learning results have been better during COVID than before in higher education, for example. But that's only when you do it properly. And there are 3 reasons why people drop out or get frustrated. They're not getting guidelines, they're not getting instructions, and they're not getting social interaction. So there are really basic things you have to fix, and you can start actually delivering really fantastic remote learning. But not until, I mean, if the discussion is only about Team versus Zoom versus Google Meet, that's not the point.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I think it's also, I mean, it applies to virtual conferences, right? You can't take a conference experience and put it online and expect the same vibe. Same with remote working, I would say. So that goes for a lot of things. So, but I can definitely see education for sure. Elena?
I actually wanted to add, like regarding the social interaction for kids. So this is a very interesting trend. I wanted to talk about the other trend, but it's not really that interesting.
We have time.
Yes. Is that current education for kids, especially that is happening online right now during the COVID pandemic. I saw the mix, a very precise mix of gaming with schooling or education, and gaming is actually something that gave kids like social interaction things. That they could compensate through like different games, through interacting in like how do they call it, Fortnite or Minecraft or whatever, and also in other platforms like I call it like Roblox model. So basically they can do something and share it with the other kids, and they can like interact with the projects of the other kids, and they can socialize like that. Of course, it cannot fully replace the offline communication between people, but it can be a great additional thing to the current education model which exists in online. So when we talk about like social interactions between kids while they trying to study online, we should also take into account not only like Zoom and calls and whatever, but also think about some other non-conventional methods of interaction.
Yeah, start teaching in Roblox. I'm all for it.
If I may comment on this, because I think this is a perfect example of Vesa, what you said about pedagogy being in the center. And I think, in all honesty, I think distance learning works when we have figured out the right way from pedagogical perspective to organize it. But when we try to copy paste the kind of classroom approach, starting with 45-minute, duration of a class, and you put it online for a young kid. It just doesn't work. So we need to come up with kind of applied way of the process. And by the way, if you do find a company, if you know a company that is doing this beautifully for youngsters from 5 to 8, just please let me know. We'll be super interested to know.
Well, Ernest, you have firsthand experience with that, don't you?
So there's actually kind of two things I wanted to reflect on. And first, we've been talking about the value of school and the value of kind of digital means of providing education. And the way Kai opened it, he said school has real value for two things. One is essentially provides childcare to us parents so we retain sanity. And the second is it allows children to interact with each other, which is really important for their professional development. Now, none of those are the core thing that you theoretically go to school, which is to learn new, so the pedagogy, right? And that's the thing I think technology can have massive impact in school as it is changing from this teaching a class to teaching the individual. Because if you have a group of 30 people in the same age, and we all know that we are all extremely different in what we kind of care about and what works best for us. Now, and I think that's something that Vesa is working on and others, is kind of changing the pedagogical angle of really understanding how the individual is doing is something that technology, if done well, can achieve. But that's something that we're still in the early stages of that. And kind of, as Vesa was saying, the way we've approached remote learning is the equivalent of taking a book and putting that on an iPad and saying that's EdTech. We're just reading the same things on a screen. Now, that's kind of, that's the interesting bit for me technologically long-term. But you also asked another question, Robin, which is why wasn't this all happening before? And it was happening to some extent, and a lot of organizations were trying to build it, but it was slow. And there seems to be a massive inertia in education. And I think to some extent that is due to our own arrogance, because we all feel like experts in education because we have had it, and we typically have kids who've had it. So Robin, you were able to compare your education, your children's education, and we all love, I mean, that's the kind of the typical dinner conversation. When you talk about education, everybody will have a strong opinion on how to do it well. And when that is met with public policy and education being something very, very important, and people being afraid of messing it up because the children have one chance at it, you end up with a ship that is really slow to turn. And so only when you've arrived at a whirlpool with everything changing around us, that's given the needs to change it rapidly, but also a mandate for people to change. And my hope is that we don't go back into the calm waters and say, nice, we can now relax back into how we used to work, but we actually take that learnings and figure out from all those thousands of experiments that were going on during the last year, and we pick up what's worked and we amplify that. So that's my hope for education.
Yeah, that's a good hope to have. That's a very good point. Everyone gets touched by education, so of course everyone has an opinion. Here's another one of mine. When my kids get homework, they come home, they're playing on the iPad, PlayStation, they have screens, and suddenly you have to interrupt that process and go back to books and bundles, and they have to do their physical exercise at their desk, in their rooms, and then they go back to those tools. I don't understand, and I'm very naive probably, but I don't understand why the education sector has sort of not shifted to the tools they're already using, so you don't have to interrupt, per se, the experience, so it doesn't become A or B. And then, of course, you get sort of the juxtaposition, like the contrast between them. Am I being naive, or is there no way to sort of integrate that within? And Elena's already mentioned it. Maybe inside of the games and the tools and the social networks they're already using, and maybe even the communication tools they're already using with their friends. Like, why not make homework a central place there? And I know we're talking about kids and homeworks, which is a small part of EdTech, but I'm really interested in this, so I'm going to go with it.
I think that just let me start, please, because it's a very hot topic for me. Yeah. So first of all, I would like to say that this inefficiency and this thing, this this drawback that education is not shifting towards the tools that kids already use, is actually a great window of opportunity for educational startups, because they can earn on that and they can provide some educational services like extracurricular education, which is actually interesting for kids, and which is like gamified, which is esports based and all this stuff, you know, that kids usually like. Second point is that why it's happening. In my hypothesis is that because education is a really this sphere which is under a lot of regulations, and you need to go and approve something and make some kind of legislation and approve some programs, approve some books which are acceptable. I don't know how in your countries it works, but in Ukraine it works like this, that you actually need to like approve certain books, and some kind of right things need to be written there, and not everybody of course agrees with those right things. And it usually it's a very long process of approval of everything. And for this reason, I think that it creates this inefficiency that a lot of new tools which are already used by kids cannot be integrated into the educational system efficiently.
Yeah. And just to make you feel better, that's almost everywhere. It's a legacy institution, legacy system. So it's all very slow and bureaucratic always, I think. Anyone else want to chime in?
I think actually the key word, what I like myself, is the extracurriculum activities, and they have obviously much more flexibility. And I think, I mean, we talk very often about engagement. Gamification is part of it, and gamification of different kind of things is definitely a really good way of doing things. The other company I founded, Graphic, co-founded, we thought about 2.5 million kids to learn to read last year completely digitally with the use of game. And I mean, that's quite a lot of people, quite a lot of kids. Not enough. There's still 250 million illiterate ones to reach. But I mean, these are the ways. I mean, you don't need a teacher. I mean, it's completely intuitive. I mean, research based on everything. And these sort of things, they might be very little things, but they can have a huge impact on individual's life. And those kind of things can be, I mean, you don't have to get a permission to do it. Obviously, you can make nationwide deals with the Ministries of Education as well. But I mean, these are the sort of little things everybody can get access to. They might be free resources. They might be something you need to download or pay for. But I mean, that's a beautiful thing about the education technology and the possibilities, because you might have something really niche, but it's tackling exactly that thing you need. Obviously, then the problem is to find them, but the world is full of really interesting things.
Yeah, but it sounds like a pretty big gap between what's possible sort of during school hours on an innovation level and sort of beyond that. Then the possibilities are almost endless, but then it also gets very competitive because the barrier is relatively low, isn't it? Correct me if I'm wrong.
And I think that's spot on. And I mean, but one of the issues is that, I mean, if you take the regulator perspective, the government perspective, for them, digital learning is about getting hardware, software, and internet access. And that's why they buy. I mean, City of Vantaa used to have like 1 million iPads somewhere, maybe it's 10,000, but I mean, loads of those. So the governments know how to buy hardware. And they always think that, I mean, to digitalize something, you buy those three things. And of course, they're needed. I mean, otherwise there is no digital. But what we really need is pedagogically valid applications, content. We need teacher training, so teachers know how to use those tools, because quite often it's actually that preschooler who can use whatever device is way better than the teacher. We need social emotional skills. We need a lot of that proper digital stuff to really boost the education in different areas. But unfortunately, it's politically driven. It's really stiff. It's all those bureaucratical stiff structures we have in all the countries. And they only know about the conventional stuff. And that's something we need to be changing every day.
I love your comment about educating the educators, because that's something I really didn't think about all that much until you just mentioned it. But yeah, of course, you need to sort of get everyone on board with the same skill, because of course the kids grew up with digital tools and technology, but the teachers don't necessarily have the same mindset or skill set, right? So Kai, with your experience, I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's a complex question. I mean, it's pretty easy to kind of tackle that as long as we stay kind of if we focus on extracurricular stuff, because then there are no boundaries. That's pretty easy. When we talk about kind of formal educational institutions and the teacher there, if we think of the role of for example, the teaching materials, and I think here it's good to acknowledge that technology content, the line between is kind of blurred. So it's really hard to say where kind of content ends and technology begins. But as a teacher, you want to make sure that whatever content you are using, it's very consistent. So you don't want to jump every single day to another storyline, because many of the kids very much enjoy and get motivated by kind of consistent storylines. So typically, if we talk about, for example, learning math or languages, the storyline built in the kind of series of books is for 3 years, or a bit more or less. And there, if you would set the teacher to collect this from bits and pieces, it becomes quite a bit of work. So there, I would say that the added value by the publishers is actually making sure that the consistency of the materials is in place, the quality is checked, and it's coherent. That doesn't stop you from adding gamification and or making it more, how would I say, engaging. And I think that is what most of the publishers, at least the ones who are investing in technology, are actually doing.
Yeah. Okay. We talked a lot about. Yeah. Go ahead, Ernest.
Just one thing. I think a lot of the challenge to innovation in education is the massive fragmentation of these systems. So that's why we see a lot of innovation happen first in this kind of extracurricular space. So, for example, you see Musician, a very successful music learning solution. They've grown a lot, and they're able to own this space of, let's say, guitar learning and innovate and gamify and add context. Now, imagine if in Finland they had to go teach the A chord first, then the C sharp, then the B chord, and then in another country, oh no, you have to start with strumming first, and then you go to the notions and all those elements. So the fact that curriculum is different and language is different means that a lot of EdTech, when it's in the curriculum space, is really fragmented, and you can't reach the scale of innovation necessarily.
Great. I'm going to move away from sort of school and kids and education to another type of learning, which is adult learning, but also like literally adult learning within a professional environment, like training, workshops. I assume that is also sort of under the banner of EdTech. What my question is are those things and those trends that you have in that particular segment different from the ones that we see in sort of the younger population? Is there anything particular about adult learning that has changed a lot over the last few years, for example?
Well, it's gone online to start with.
Well, good.
I think
good.
it's fair, it's fair to say it has changed quite a bit in terms of the kind of global mindset of the learners. They, whether it's masterclass or any of Coursera's or Udacity or plural sites, it's your benchmark for content or content quality or the service quality is just global. You don't, it doesn't really help if you're the second best in Belgium when you're trying to compete, in certain professional development area. You have to be, top 5 globally. Then I would argue that there is, because of the kind of scalability and availability, you start to see kind of these niche players, kind of content by content niche players emerging. And it might be that we see theoretical approaches, but also very concrete, fast to apply skills becoming more of the kind of way of learning in terms of professional development. So whether you want to understand corporate finance, you don't read the theory, you just actually try to start doing exercises. You can do those with your peer groups, on actual cases. All of that is quite different from attending a local trainer workshop, for example.
Yeah. So it's gone online, it's more accessible, more available. You could do it in groups online. That's fantastic, but it doesn't sound incredibly innovative to me. It sounds like sort of like a natural evolution of what we're already happening.
I think one of the things to follow is looking at what Microsoft is doing with Teams, because they realize that that's the modern channel, and most of the workforce they serve are they are operating on Teams today. So when you look at the services available, I think that will be quite a platform for professional development, especially from kind of corporate perspective. You integrate with LinkedIn, the profiles, the organization, the HR kind of department requirements, and then you have kind of pre-selected vendors for almost whatever you need. It's a pretty neat way of tackling your kind of development needs.
Yeah, agree.
Just, I
think there's.
So
go ahead.
Thank you, Vesa. I think innovation is starting in it and will come because one thing, the scale has changed. So EU has committed a large sums of money and a lot of focus on digital upskilling. So there's a realization that I think caused by the tech. So tech has caused a realization that tech is good for economic well-being of individuals, and that's led to more tech. So I think there's a demand for more of it, and people are starting to do more, and that will lead to more innovation in it. And we see slightly different business model. We see some business model innovation. So, for example, coding schools where you don't pay, but you only pay when you start earning. So that's another example. So I think we're kind of in the early stages of that innovation, but it hasn't been transformational, but I think the scale will enable it to be over time. Sorry, Vesa.
I also see that.
Thanks. I think there's some.
Elena or Vesa, I think there's some delay, but Elena or Vesa, whoever wants to go first.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Maybe something is happening with the connection. Regarding that adult education and lifelong learning, I think that there is, there wasn't such a huge trend of such a huge rise of adult education during the pandemic, but it's something that is more structural because it was happening over time. And what I see, what is gaining popularity right now is education which is aimed at people who want to change their career, change their profession. They want to get new skills at their 30s or 40s and start a new career from zero. And this is actually a really interesting thing because it's happening due to the overall trend of the fact that the world is moving quicker right now, and that that some careers are getting outdated, and that you cannot earn as much as you want in your current place, in your current position, and you need to switch and make this total pivot of your life. So I think that this is a great trend. It's a sad trend sometimes, but it's happening.
Yeah, and it also serves sort of the wave of remote working, because now theoretically you could work for any company in the world. So why not reskill or upskill yourself to better fit those needs, right? So, Vesa, you had something to share as well.
Sorry about the talking on top of everybody else. I think there is a much bigger change taking place in the corporate training than in the K-12, for example. The kids will be going to schools. I really doubt if the adults will be going back to classrooms for professional training. And now when the corporations have realized that they need to go digital, that's the first step. And that's happening. I think it started happening in September, October. They're pretty hesitant in the beginning of the pandemic. They wanted to feel a little bit, is this a real change or something temporary? Then they realized that, hey, now we need to react. And when they realize it, they do it properly. And that's something we see now every day in Planet, for example, corporations who really want to go fully digital in the learning space. And Then I think actually the industry will be very much. I mean, I don't really think we're going to see for something. I mean, those emerge every once in a while, but I think the key is the data to really measure the return on investment in competence management or competence development, capacity building, whatever you call it. So if you provide sales training to sales guys, are they selling more as a result of it? And the corporations know how to lead with data much, much better than education institutions, governments, or public sector in general. And that's going to be driving the change further.
Fantastic. I can't believe it myself, but we're already at 40 minutes. That flew by. I learned a lot. So thank you so much for sharing your insights, all of you. Elena, Ernests, Vesa, and Kai, thank you so much for educating me and hopefully the rest of the audience as well. And hopefully see you in person soon.